We're moving into a little bit of a panel discussion. We've had some amazing insights there from this morning, some research and some engaged community practice and action through the stories and through the questions at the end. So what I'm going to do is just situate ourselves in the conversation again of what conversation are we in. We have some amazing guests with us. Sarah is here, Laura and Sinead, and they're going to be speaking about their experience. And then we'll have a little bit of dialogue among ourselves and hopefully have some time for questions at the end before we go into the breakout groups. So if we remind ourselves of what is the title of this symposium, the transformative power of community engaged learning. And when that title came, the word transformative jumped out of the page. You know, we see this word a lot, transformative, but actually, what does it mean to really think about that word? What does it mean to engage with that word? But what does it also mean in the lived experience? I think as we've seen through the conversation as well, I would agree with Linda, we're in these incredible pivotal times. You know, this last year and a half as teachers, as practitioners, has transformed our practice, not necessarily always out of choice, but out of crisis. But what is that? In crisis, there's also opportunity. And we're seeing this pivotal transformative time at the moment. And when we break down that word transform, we have change, form, changing, and what we're going to hear from today is people's experience of what has transformation been like in a lived way. And I think often when we think about transformation in community or in society, we think about, beneficiaries or others as out there. But actually, again, what Helga drew on is that transformation is an ecosystem. It's an ecology where we bring in place, we bring in individual, heart, mind, body, soul, and we bring in community of practitioners, of learners, of what does it mean to create new ecologies that we can evolve into, transform into, emerge into, whether that be in universities, in communities and practice, in our families, in our homes. It's all part of how are we coping, how are we transcending into this moment of transformation? What change do we want to make in society? I think ultimately that's what we're here for, trying to make the world a better place, and just to remember that. So that's a little bit of the context of what we're in and the power of what we're in as well. And with us today are three people who have been living that experience. So Sarah's going to give us a little bit of an introduction to the program that we're going to focus on. And then Sinead is going to share a little bit of her story, and Laura too. So we're going to go to Sarah first, who'll give us an insight, and then we'll move the conversation around. So Sarah.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I'm just going to share a few slides, and I might come back at the very end, just with a little bit of reflection on transformation also. So I'm going to introduce to you the UCD Community Drugs Programme, which has been in existence for over 20 years. And I have to acknowledge important colleagues as well. Dr. Hilda Loughran actually commenced this programme, and she doesn't actually require too much of our begging before she stays involved and always helps us. And Dr. Mary Ellen McCann did a tremendous work on this programme before I was lucky enough to join it, particularly on the progression rate. So let me tell you really quickly what it is. We work with students who have experienced significant exclusion and disadvantage, and it is incredibly deep, engaged work. So it was lovely that all the conversation that we're having so far brought us up to this point about how do we actually engage community. So hopefully we can talk to you about that. We have small cohorts of students, normally 20 to 25, over an intense one-year programme, which is equivalent to 1 year of undergraduate study. And some of our students will have experienced severe educational disadvantage and exclusion, but those will be mixed in our cohort with some who are a little bit further along the road, and also some that are wishing to gain kind of professional skills in the area and may already be working as guards, social workers, key workers, project workers. But the mix of this cohort of students is key. Back in the day when we were on campus, this is a photograph from, I think, 2-3 years ago, where the students were on their final day and had handed in all their final assignments. Key in this programme and set up by Dr. Mary Ellen McCann with support from Hilda Loughran was this progression to straight onto the second year of the undergraduate BSOC science. So an incredibly innovative programme since 2010 that progression route has been there. Community partnership is key, and that's why we obviously have colleagues here, Sinead, who has been through the programme herself, and Laura. The programme is delivered in partnership with Ballymun Youth Action Project, and Laura is going to talk a little bit about transformation from her perspective. But we do everything jointly: student recruitment, retention, our teaching, our assessing, and also really importantly sharing of the risk, income generation, as well as we have set up and developed a really productive research alliance. Two things that I think I really want to, suppose, highlight is that we do co-located teaching delivery. So I now have a terminology for that, which is place conscious pedagogical kind of delivery, but we do locate the programme both in Ballymun Youth Action Project and in UCD, and quality is everything. So we talk an awful lot about the best context, the best environments for our students, the best lecturers, the best guidance. So what I would like to do now is stop sharing, and I would like to hand over to Sinead, who I think is going to talk a little bit about transformation from her perspective.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Sinead Jordon, as Sarah said, and I work in the Labour Inclusion Programme in the Northside Partnership here in Kilbarrack and Coolock. And my journey began in the Northside Partnership, where I went looking for advice and guidance as I was, I think, 40 years of age. I come from many years of addiction. I was an early school leaver. I left school when I was 13. I had 2 children in my teens, so the odds were against me. And I also had dyslexia, which I didn't find out till in my 40s. So off I went to the Northside Partnership, and I began my journey of education. I suppose my journey, when I was younger, education wasn't important, unfortunately, and that's the kind of a background I've come from. But as I got older with my own children, I realised I want my children to have an education and have a chance in life. I really didn't want them to follow in my footsteps. And I think sometimes the best thing you can do is lead by example and realise it's never too late. And I feel blessed every day that I ended up in Urrús through an agency visit. I started small. I started off with level 3 and level 4 education. Then I done a level 5, and I done an agency visit, and I bumped into Laura. And I thought Laura was a student. I thought she was about 14. And she said, would you not come along to our diploma? And I didn't even know what a diploma was. So that's really exactly where I'm coming from. And most people maybe that are looking for community engagement, they need support and someone to sit down and tell them this is what it is. So off I went, and in the process, my daughter also started a degree at the same time. So she went off to Blanche IT to be a social care worker. I wanted to do the drugs and alcohol work because I come from addiction, and I wanted to help people. Because if there's one thing I knew I did have was a lot of compassion for people that have suffered. So off I went and done my diploma, and a lot of hand holding. And that's where I met Sarah. So the good thing about the diploma was it brought you over to do 1 or 2 modules in UCD, which was something I've never experienced. And I don't think I ever would have experienced, only for I went to Urrús. I suppose the area I come from, no one really gets 3rd level education. So off I went, and I finished off the diploma, and I got offered then the 2nd year to go into a 2nd year of the degree. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. But there had been a couple of other guys that had done it, and they came in to speak to us one day in the diploma, and off I went and done it. And I got through it. I worked so hard. I had a lot of support from Sarah and Laura and everyone that was over there. And then it was like, why don't you do the masters? And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but you know what? I realized I am never going to get this opportunity again in my life. I'm going to take it. And I went off and done the masters, and I just wanted to share, like, myself and my daughter, when I graduated with my degree, and my daughter graduated from Blanche IT a couple of weeks later, and it was just like the ripple effect, like Helga talked about, the ripple effect. And I tell you, it was one of the proudest moments in my life being in UCD with a cap and gown, and just, oh, it was just overwhelming. And there was a couple of us from community engagement training over there teaching, and it was a lovely moment. But anyway, I just wanted to share the most important thing. I started in the Northside Partnership. That was a support to former drug misusers to help them get into training and education. And the girl, Sam, asked me, what would you like to do, Sinead? And I said, oh, I'd love to do what you're doing. And she said, well, go and get an education. And off that job came up 2 years ago. And I went for the job, and I'm actually doing her job now. And people come into me and I say, what you want to do? And they're going, I wouldn't mind doing what you're doing, Sinead. But like, I laugh, and I always share the story. And I'm always very honest about, I've come from addiction, and I've come from a lot of disadvantage, because people need to hear that people can make it. They can make it. It's never too late. I just want to thank anyone that's involved in this kind of teaching, because it helps people like me have a chance and to be able to transfer or transform. I just wrote down a few years. I just wanted to make sure that I suppose what it's really given me is empowerment. It's empowered me to live my life and have a job that I would have never have had only 4 years. So I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. There's my alarm. I set it because I was talking. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thanks again.
Sinead, that was really beautiful. There's comments like streaming in like a waterfall into the comment about just how inspiring that is. I have had those moments of my heart kind of beating as you were speaking. Just to hear this testimony and to be a witness to what you're just saying is very powerful. So thank you for sharing your story and this. And I know, Laura, you've been instrumental, and also I know it's been transformative for you, being involved in this. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your own role and kind of what this work means for you as well.
Great, thanks, Claire. I'm really regretting the order of this setup now. I wish Sinead had have gone after me. Anyway, I've changed a couple of times kind of what I thought I was going to say today, and I've been kind of struggling to I suppose I've been trying to weigh up, God, what's the big struggle around trying to decide what I felt were the really important kind of points that I wanted to make today. And I think partly that's because I'm so delighted to hear that this conversation is taking place within the university, because for me, community engaged learning, it just makes absolute sense, and it's really, I suppose, for me, as Sinead has just said, it's absolutely the way to go in terms of how we might bridge that gap between community and university. So I know Sarah has kind of mentioned the partnership. I just want to backtrack a couple of steps first before I jump into the partnership. As it's kind of been said, so I'm the coordinator of Urrús, and Urrús is the training and education centre of the Ballymun Youth Action Project. And the Ballymun Youth Action Project is 40 years in existence and was set up by community people in Ballymun to respond to local drug and alcohol related issues. And I think kind of, the last kind of 30 years, it's probably not unusual to hear us talking about community responses to drug and alcohol issues. But I think probably what has been quite significant about the Ballymun Youth Action Project is that education and community education has always been the absolute core of what we do and how we do it. And that's been really important kind of over the last 30 to 40 years. So Urrús was established as a specific service to respond to the community education and training needs. And so I suppose within that, we design and we deliver a whole range of community-based education training programs, typically around supporting communities and individuals and families to better be able to respond to local drug and alcohol issues, but also the other issues that are attached to drug and alcohol, as Sarah mentioned, in terms of other disadvantage, including poverty, early school leaving and unemployment. So I think community education for us, again, it's central to what we do and to actually kind of how we operate and to, I suppose, our whole approach. And in terms of, I suppose, thinking about that role of community engaged learning, again, I've been struck by, I suppose, the conversations this morning that we, through that community education, we witnessed that kind of not just that individual transformation, but also that community transformation that is happening or can happen as a result of, I suppose, investing and resourcing education within communities. So one program in particular that we have is our Community Addiction Studies course. And again, I think it was first developed around 1994. And the main aim of that program is to bring communities together, to educate communities around drug and alcohol issues. But it's to take it a step further and to actually empower communities to be able to understand what's happening in their communities, but to also be able to respond to their communities at a local level. And I think that idea of, I suppose, how communities can respond and the transformation that can happen in communities, again, is central to why we as an organisation invest so much kind of resourcing into community education. But what we've kind of found along the way is that often people come together because there's a particular community need and wanting to understand more about what's happening in their community. But inevitably what we get from there is we have people then who begin to think, God, could I go on and do a little bit more? Or what would I need to do to go on and do another course? And the conversations that we begin to see in terms of that transformation with individuals is that we often have people at the beginning saying, oh, I wouldn't be able for anything more than a level 5, or I wouldn't be able to go to university. And that quickly begins to change into, do you think I could go on and do something else? Or do you think I might be able, should I put an application in? And then as Sinead said, that we get people then on the programme and it begins to be, well, after the diploma, what more can I do? There's a couple of really important points I'd say to go back to. I suppose there's been conversations this morning around how do we ensure that the voice of community is part of these conversations. And I think the partnership between Urrús, the Ballymun Youth Action Project, and the Community Drugs Programme in UCD is a really good example of that. And I know Sarah has acknowledged Hilda and Mary Ellen, so again, just to acknowledge further, I think the fact that this programme has been in existence, the partnership has been in existence for a long number of years, it really kind of does a couple of things. For us in Ballymun, it really allows us to say to people that university is possible, it is available, and it is accessible. And people might need particular support to help them to, I suppose, make those applications and come to the programme. But having a programme in our community drug and alcohol service that is a university programme is really, really important. So we'll have a mix then of, you know, Sarah said that on the course we have a mix of people coming from different backgrounds, different lived experience, different work experience. But in our own service, it's really important for us. So we'd have people coming in to access the drug and alcohol services, and they'll say, oh, where are those people going? Where are they? And we'd say, well, they're going onto the 3rd floor. And the conversation is, well, what's happening on the 3rd floor? Well, people go upstairs to study, they're doing a course. The course is a UCD course. People are UCD students in this building and in this community. And that's really, really important. But equally, I think in Urrús and in Ballymun, we've a real opportunity to help bridge that gap that people might, or those gaps or challenges that people might feel, you know, is blocking them from getting to university. So we can talk about, well, it's only 2 buses from Ballymun or other communities out to the campus, but there's more barriers than just the transport. So for us, I suppose there's something really important that we encourage people out on the campus. As Sinead said, that, you know, there is a dual location in the teaching, and so people attend classes in Ballymun, but they also attend classes in UCD. And that's really, really important, because I think it's only really when people get to set foot on campus and to be sitting in a classroom or a lecture theatre in UCD that they begin to take on and own that identity as a UCD student. So I think that's something that's really important around the partnership, and I suppose an example of community engaged learning. I'm probably running out of time, but just a couple of things I'd really love to say kind of that I've heard from this morning. I think, and I know Sarah will talk a little bit about this as well, community engaged learning, as I said, to me, it makes sense. It's the way to do education. But it is hard, it's difficult and it's challenging, and I suppose the partnership is challenging and it's difficult at times. And I think that idea that we've kind of, are those kind of key words we've heard this morning around trust and reciprocity and there being a mutual benefit is really important. And I think the idea of, I suppose, ensuring that communities don't feel like they're the ones being researched, but actually from the bottom up, that communities can inform and influence the research, and they can inform and influence the way in which we can be taught or we can be educated and how we can learn in communities. So I think that's me. I think I'm going to send us back over to Sarah, and she'll kind of talk a little bit more around the partnership.
Thank you, Laura. I'm just really not going to say much more at all, because I think you've heard so many important points from Laura and from Sinead, and I still quite feel emotional listening. So just a few quick things around, yes, the work is so hard, but there was something that Sinead said when we were chatting the other day, and she said, you know, you understood, she was talking about Laura and I, and in general, you know, that we had the academic capacity, and you just helped us to find that. And that just, I've been thinking about it ever since, Sinead. I'm going to just leave you with a quote. And I can thank my colleague from the University of Vienna, Donata Ramizzi. She said, gosh, I found this quote, Sarah, and I think it's so aligned with the work that is happening in the UCD Community Drugs Programme. So it's an old one, but I'm just going to finish up with that. Thank you.
Great. Sarah, you might, if you can, pop that quote into the chat box there for people. I think that would be nice. So that was a kind of a quick insight, quick overview. There's so much lived experience between all of you, you know, about how learning has rippled out. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that ripple effect, if you wouldn't mind, like that kind of transformative effect in your, what impacts have you seen or influence have you seen in the wider community from doing these initiatives? What changes are you noticing? And I'd love to go to you, Sinead, first, just from what you've seen around, you know, your daughter, how incredible, graduating just a few weeks after you, and
yeah,
yeah,
so as I said, well, I suppose the biggest change was in myself, from being able to get from level 3 to level 9. And it was way above any expectations I ever had of myself. But the two ladies were really able to help me see that I had it. I just hadn't got the opportunities in life. So the ripple effect is that, like, I have 4 grandchildren now, like, and through me getting an education as well, I never want to go back to addiction. So I live a 12-step life. So it's like, the ripple effect is I tell education is the way forward. It's just really, really, and then in my job, I have a lot of people coming in, and I really just push people towards education. And it's the discovery of yourself, the journey with yourself that you have is just so important. But yes, my daughter went on then and done a level 9 with Sarah in a couple of months ago, women and substance misuse, because you always want to be learn. But yeah, education, I just love it, you know. And I'm a big promoter of community education programs.
It's really about ending a cycle and starting a new one, isn't it? Beautiful. Laura, would you like to respond?
Yeah, Claire, I think for me, just that importance for people that there's either a self-belief in their own abilities or capacities, that education is for them. And I think, you know, if people have had maybe, you know, kind of Sinead gave as an example, but if people have maybe had experiences where education they felt wasn't for them, I think for us to say, well, actually, it is for you, it is, and how do we just make that more accessible and available for people? But I think what we do begin to see is, again, even as people move through our own programs in Urrús before they can even, you know, think about getting to, say, our level 7 diploma, there's, I suppose, it's something around helping people to develop that sense of belief in themselves, that not only will they be able for it, but actually that they are entitled to have that opportunity in the same way that other people have had those opportunities.
Amazing. And what struck me by all of your stories was this, like, just one step at a time, you know, start here, experience that, okay, maybe then next time. And the story of the floor, you know, it's like, oh, what's happening up there? So it's like this gradual program. Sarah, would you like to jump in? Is there anything you want to add into that?
Yeah, just two things, Claire. I was really thinking about transformation for myself doing this work, and transformation within the university. And I thought, gosh, you know, I'm so embedded in this way of teaching that it has changed how I teach postgrad courses. Laura and I was going to say, dragged each other through a process of setting up a level 9 online professional certificate. And I was so hoping Sinead was going to mention that, because I wouldn't obviously say it unless she said it. But our joy when we saw last year that Sinead's daughter was now accessing a postgraduate award that we'd set up to be fully online and in the partnership, it was such a moment that crystallized that kind of transformation. But community engaged teaching and learning has changed how I teach all students, I think, because I work in that very participative way, and it's very interesting to think about how to bring that into your, I suppose, wider teaching. And I think this sea change that we're seeing happen in the university, where this has been really understood and looked at, and Helga's referred to that, it's just such an exciting time. So it is amazing to see that, when we know that this work has been going on for 20 years.
So in terms of expanding that reach, then I want to ask each of you, what would be your vision for it? Where can it go? And how can people here start thinking about being involved in that work? Who wants to jump in? Sarah, do you want to jump in?
I'll start. Yeah. And then, you know, I had a conversation with a colleague the other day who was asking something similar, and I said, yeah, you know, it will feel a little bit overwhelming because it is intense and it's very deeply relational, but it is so worth it. And I suppose we're providing you with one or two examples, but of course we work with cohorts of 20, 25 students, and we see these kind of micro transformations in every session. In every moment that we're teaching, you see those shifts and changes for people. So I suppose in terms of the future, I think there's lots more opportunities, and there's recognition of the importance of this work, but it does require a kind of a mind shift out of that normal kind of containment of how we think about our teaching, our research and our administration. So I think the first step is to say, well, what would happen if I stepped outside of that and thought of that work differently?
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah.
I'll go next. Yeah. So I think because I work with people, I sometimes find there's not a lot of places to send them. You might get to a level 5, and while Urrús is just superb, it's actually the only diploma that will give people a progression pathway. It's the only one I know of, a progression pathway into a degree. So it would be brilliant if more community groups were involved in maybe helping people at the start through progression pathways into universities to do degrees, masters, and maybe PhDs. Who knows?
Absolutely. There you go. There's the next steps. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, I think, Claire, just it's how do we just kind of create those opportunities to maybe just, I think having conversations like this is even just that starting point. So it's those opportunities, but I think it's even seeing the absolute value. So I know that in Ballymun and the other communities we work in, not just Ballymun, that with the benefit that we get from the partnership in UCD is extended out, and equally I'm sure that what Urrús and Ballymun brings to the table is enhancing kind of the work in UCD in some way. So I think the more we can get that message out there, I'd love to kind of just see that there's enhanced kind of community engaged partnerships, you know, across different communities and maybe different universities as well.
No, I think that's a really important point you make there, Laura. Like, that's essentially reciprocity in action, isn't it? You know, it's like it's all enriched because of the relationship, and it's relational. Great. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat here. Feel free to pop in, or you could also speak your question out. if you want to say anything or add anything into the mix. Sarah, have you any other thing you want to add in, just in terms of kind of responding to where we're at?
Can I butt in and ask a question?
Deirdre,
yeah.
So yeah.
I'm just really interested from all three perspectives. If there's somebody listening, if someone is listening to your amazing panel today, what advice would you give community partners, the universe, somebody, a lecturer in the university, or a student for starting off in this work? How do you get started? Like a first step, a first baby step, what advice would that be?
Oh, goodness. Be brave. I think it has to come from a place of passion. So whether you're passionate, as Sinead was, about continuing her education, and I think I think Sinead underplays the huge amount of hard work that she put in again and again and again and again, and many of our students do. And also not all of our students go on to progression. You know, for them, achieving a level 7 award from UCD is huge for them, and that carries them into a work role. So I think it has to start from passionate kind of beginnings, and then you need to look for your allies. And I see Joe has just put in around the kind of access courses. So we have amazing work happening with the UCD for All, what Teresa is doing around community engagement. And these structures are starting to come together. And that's very different. Say I'm in UCD for 7 years, and it's a completely different context from when I started, certainly 7 years ago, where those pieces were just starting to integrate. And I think Gillian has just put into the chat there around mentors. So we've done quite a lot of work around mentors through a learning enhancement project formally this year. And Tobias is one of our mentors and one of the diploma graduate PhD students. So we have those already, Claire. But, you know, I think that piece around all the different elements that you need is key. Sinead or Laura might add something else.
I think with the passion that you're mentioning, Sarah, is like a belief and a buy-in to that this works. And I would say, why not? You know, so I think it does take that. But I mean, it is resource intensive as well. I mean, Sarah and I would spend lots of time even just having conversations about different things and what's happening and how best to do things. So I think with that passion is a belief in it and a buy-in to this kind of way of teaching and learning.
Great.
I'll just jump in. I think one of the most important things, like what Sarah said, is that I was able to see that she got me. You know what I mean? I think when you're working, that you need to get people, you need to get where they're coming from. And there's a lot of hand holding, I think, at the start. And also there was a girl doing a diploma this year, and she's a friend of mine, and I was encouraging her, go and do it. And there's actually 2 clients were doing it, and a girl I work with have all done the diploma this year, but one girl in particular, she was ringing when she was having her meltdowns. So I think to be able to be available, to be there for people, or to show them where there is support, because I had many meltdowns. I rang Laura one day, I was like, I can't do that essay, and she said, sit down, breathe, get a pencil, and she, but you know, that's very important. Support is very important. So yeah.
Amazing. So I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, we're just there. So that great question, Deirdre. I think that was a really helpful kind of, you know, next steps. Where do we go from here? So what food for thought in this conversation? Incredible lived experience and the power of story, what you shared, all of you, just around listening to your own stories of involvement and change. We have a chance now to move into smaller groups where we'll be in some smaller dialogue, really thinking about what is this idea of transformation for ourselves? Also, what, you know, where do we want to bring this? And what does that mean? For finding your allies, I loved that as well. And just really thinking about, you know, I think everybody this year has had this year and a half, whatever, have had a challenging time. We've all been in this kind of strange time. But hearing these stories, I think, is really about hope and action. You know, it's inspiring, but it's very hopeful, but it's hope because people are putting something into practice. And it's in their hands, and it's saying we don't have all the answers, but we can figure this out together. It was really, I think what you just each of you shared there, nobody's alone in this. It's a collective. It has to be a community-led thing for it to work and support each other. So I just want to seed all of that as we move into breakout rooms. We've also had Emer's illustrations going on. So just to help us reflect on some of the conversation we may share, I think we wanted to share some of the Emer's visuals there.